In fact, the billion-dollar question here is that what would happen to the industry, as in the EB-5 industry, post 30th of September 2026, and we'll only know once we get there, right? How can the EB-5 program be reauthorized as a law in the future? Do you feel that the program has significant support for its future? Ignacio, I would really want to hear from you on this one.
Thank you. It's a great question. Obviously, we're engaging in a little bit of crystal ball gazing. So this is my version of the future. I think there is a strong desire for the continuity of the EB-5 program in the Senate, which is critical because the Senate has traditionally been the place where immigration legislation is presented for the first time and negotiated among senators. I think that the President and the Secretary of Commerce have openly stated their desire to move on from the EB-5 program, at least in its current version. The President has mentioned that it's too inexpensive, for example. So the future of the EB-5 program, to me, is likely going to be a long negotiation between the Senate and the White House. Now, what features will be discussed? One issue which is critical to investors are visa numbers and waiting lists. So the Senate hopefully will push for more numbers to clear backlogs and make the program even more attractive. At the same time, the White House is likely to push for an increased investment amount because they believe that the program should cost more. It grants the benefit of U.S. permanent residency for an entire family, and they think that it should cost more. Other features that are probably going to be discussed are job creation numbers. Is it right that 10 jobs continue to be the minimum requirement? Source of funds tracing. Will the same source of funds tracing that we now see in the Gold Card program become the standard for the EB-5 program? Right, and these are the negotiations that will go on through many months, frankly. And I believe that the negotiations in real terms will only begin after September 30th, 2026.
In fact, I would just want to go back to the conversation where Rohit mentioned that this should become more of a permanent change, and just keeping the fact that the amount may change based on the inflation and all of those things. But Rohit, can visa allocations from the TEA categories or quotas change in the future? So what I mean by that is, can some of the 6,800 pre-RIA EB-5 visa allocations be moved to the pool of 3,200 TEA visas? I know none of us have a crystal ball here, but...
Yeah, but let me try and clarify per my understanding. So you've got your 20% for rural, then you've got your 10% for high unemployment, then you've got your 2% for infrastructure. Anything over and above that is already going into the unreserved category.
Correct.
So I don't see how or why any unreserved category number should come back into this TEA definition, unless I'm not understanding your question.
I guess, if I may, so I think what we're trying to understand is, once the backlog is cleared, or if the backlog is cleared, can it then move to, I'm sure it's probably not going to be applicable for China as a country because it's way more retrogressed. But let's say if other backlogged countries are done, can then that category or those unused visa numbers be moved to post-RIA investors? Because what are they going to be used for, pre-RIA investors, if they don't exist or if they're processed?
I think your big thing over there is if that ever happens.
Yeah,
I mean, when retrogression hits, and I'm sure this will come up in conversation as well, if retrogression hits, it's going to be for so many years that unless the program somehow just comes to an end and there are no additional investors, or like Ignacio correctly said, if the burden of proving your source becomes so impossible to meet that you have all this extra numbers lying around, I don't see how that's realistically going to happen. And even today, for those who are applying at consulates, we're all seeing notices from the NBC saying, select the category you want to get into.
Absolutely.
So that itself is becoming a subject of conversation. Like, can you switch the categories later on? Are you stuck with the category that you select? So I think it's quite a bit of crystal ball gazing at this point.
Although
in time.
I would like to come in here, if I may. And my 2 cents on this is that even today, we have the concept of dual approval code in the current EB-5 legislation. And let me break it down into the common terms for you. So whenever we receive an approval of the I-5 application, we have the approval under 2 codes. One is the reserve category, which you have selected in your I-5 and 485 form, and the other category is unreserved. And by default, you get processed in the category that you have selected in the form. Having said that, you do have the option to select to be processed under unreserved if at all, for example, on the date when you have an approval, there is a backlog that exists in the reserve category. Which is why I think as a firm, and I'll let Ignacio come in, we do believe that it may happen so at some point of time, having regards to country caps and all of that, there will not be a requirement of non-Chinese investors to capture the pre-RI quota or the unreserved quota, because majority of the clients of our firm have already seen green cards for pre-RI. So it may happen so that there may be a spillover of the unreserved quota.
Yeah.
And it can't just be said as a spillover, it may rather be a choice or selection. And this is something that we already have as a provision in the EB-1, EB-2 and EB-3 categories. Ignacio, would you like to add to that?
I think you've captured the issue very, very great, very nicely.
The only additional comment I would make is for EB2 and EB3, the unused visa numbers can go back and forth in those categories.
Yes.
EB5 does not have that provision. So we can't get fallout numbers or carryover numbers from 1, 2, 3 into EB5.
Correct.
Neither is there an upward movement from EB5 into 1, 2, 3. So it'll be very interesting to see how all of this works out. And it all kind of ties in so many different ways to something Ignacio talked about earlier in terms of, and we've all discussed it in terms of, lawsuits for the gold card and how are you going to use those numbers and how do you drag those numbers into the gold card when the law is not authorizing it. So a wonderful landscape of lots of ups and downs.
Yeah.
A little bit
Lot
of
of work for
astrology.
us.
So experts here, but a little bit of astrology here as well, like predicting.
Or
hoping.
palmistry or card
Casting.
whatever you want to call it.
Great.